In this video, I will tell you how to make a Toy Story film. To inspire you, let me quickly take you on a tour of my toy room in my house, which I use to make my Toy Story films. I have many toys that I've collected over many years stored here, and I have 2 film sets in here as well. Ideally, you want your toys displayed on shelves so you can easily see them and find them, because when you can see them, you can get ideas for characters in your films. Here is my big 4-level G.I. Joe Adventure dollhouse, which is the larger of my 2 film sets. It has an outside area, it has a secret hidden entrance that heads into a bar, cafe. It has a kitchen, it has a command center, it has a laboratory, supplies area, garage, it has a bathroom, a bedroom, and then it has a large cave system with a jail. And here is a film set, which is essentially a 7-foot long table with a backdrop, a painted backdrop, where I can set up various scenes. And of course, it helps to be able to quickly look over my shelves to see what characters I may want to use for these scenes. Okay, now that I've hopefully stimulated your interest, this is an outline of what I'm going to present today. Going from reasons to make Toy Story films, equipment needed, coming up with story ideas, assembling props, pros and cons of different sized toys, basics on creating film sets, using other people's content in your film, basics on video editing, some demonstration of some fun techniques in video editing, and some comments about narration for different characters in your films. First, we'll start with 4 reasons why you'd want to make a Toy Story film. Number 1, it's magical and stimulates your imagination and creativity. And imagination is one of the most underrated powers in the universe. It is a healing power. Number 2, so many problems that exist in the world can actually be solved in a fictional Toy Story. There is great value in catharsis. Number 3, doing a Toy Story gives you a reason to collect toys and be a child again, and it allows you to develop the skills involved in creating a story. Number 4, doing a Toy Story is not hard or expensive. Very little equipment is needed. It's far easier than a standard film, and it's more satisfying and feels more real than animation. There are only 4 things you need to make a Toy Story film. The first thing, obviously, is toys, and you need just enough to tell your story or create your entire film series if you're making a series. Number 2 is some type of camera, and most any camera will do as long as it can do stop-motion photography. Number 3, you'll need a tripod to keep the camera steady. Number 4, you'll need some type of video editing software. Another thing to mention about video editing is you're going to want a computer that is powerful enough to do video editing. Not every computer is. Now, as you start out, the very first thing you're going to need to do is come up with a story. Websites for writers have great tips on this, as novelists are constantly looking for new story ideas, and they are doing much of the same work that you would do in terms of creating the plot line, figuring out who the characters are, figuring out the scenes, and how the story will end. My suggestion is that if you are new to story development, begin very simply so you don't get overwhelmed. Once you come up with a loose idea, there are different things you can do to refine the story and develop it. One of those is to imaginatively start spending a lot of time in the world that you are creating and just see where you go with the flow. Another is think of your characters and start living through your characters and see where they go. You want to make sure that you figure out the ending for your story, because knowing what the ending is will help you figure out the middle of the story, because you'll be aware of what's needed in the middle to move you towards the ending. One of the things that I like to recommend for trying to figure out a story is there a book or movie that you like where there's something about the story that you would like to change? Because that's a great opportunity for you. You can change whatever you want. You could change the characters. You could change how it ends. You could make it from a depressing story into a happy one. In my opinion, in the big Hollywood productions, there's way too much violence, way too much darkness, way too much depravity and evil. We can change that and make the world a better place with our film. Next, you will assemble all your props. You'll get all the toys that you need for your film. So for a Toy Story film, I'm assuming that you're buying your toy figures. You can certainly make them out of clay, but that's a lot more complicated, so we won't be covering that in this film. Now, you can certainly make a Toy Story using hand puppets, though that does not lend itself to stop-motion film. So, with toy characters, you basically have 4 choices, which are shown here. The smallest are the Lego figures, approximately 1.5 inches tall. Then you have the 3-inch figures, which is the Playmobil, the Calico Critter, various military men. Then you have the 6-inch figures, and then you have the 12-inch figures, which is the size of Barbie, Ken, and G.I. Joe. You will also find toy cars in these scales, plus the smaller ones. Now I want to discuss the pros and cons of these different size toy figures. So the smallest figures, the Lego figures, 1.5 inch, and the 3-inch Playmobil and Calico Critters, those are the most advantageous because there are a huge amount of props that you can buy that go with them. All kinds of vehicles, all kinds of houses, and all kinds of different characters. Playmobil in particular has several kinds of ethnic characters. Now, a lot of these were made in the past and they're not readily available. To get all sorts of unusual toys, try used toy stores, Etsy or eBay or garage sales. Also, to keep your expenses down, garage sales or free boxes. So as I was mentioning, the small characters have the most props available. The 6 and 12-inch characters, you're going to have a harder time finding vehicles or houses. There are Barbie houses that are for a 12-inch size figure, but you may not want a Barbie house for your film. It may not fit what your story is. So here I summarize some of the pros and cons of the different scale figures. And you basically need to consider what you want to accomplish with your film, and that will help you decide what scale to use. One of the bigger drawbacks of the larger figures is that they generally will not stand up by themselves. So if you're doing stop motion video, this is going to be difficult with the larger figures as you'll have to come up with some kind of trick to hold them up, which is especially hard if you're having them walk across a surface. It is important to mention that due to the magic of green screen, you can combine toys of different sizes in the same video and make them all look the same scale. You can even put yourself in a video with tiny toys and make yourself look that scale. Now I want to say a little bit about making film sets. The film set is the spot where you create your film. This can be as simple as a table with a piece of colored paper or fabric in the background, or it can be as elaborate as this example of a craftswoman's extraordinarily meticulous and detailed little steampunk room that she made inside a fairly small cardboard box. The sense I get is people who want to spend a lot of time on elaborate sets are oriented more towards the props and less to the story. If you are oriented to the story, you're not going to want to spend a year getting set up just so you can tell your story. So you'll probably go for a simpler type of set. Now these are some of the elements of an indoor film set, and you can also work outdoors. You don't need as much material, but it's not as comfortable to work outdoors, and you don't want to be hauling a lot of toys back and forth to a location that may not be that close to you. So now I want to discuss something that is widely misunderstood, and that is using elements of other people's work. Now, those who are new to filmmaking will often be under the mistaken impression that you can never use other people's work. That is not true. There are two things to be aware of on this subject. Number one, there are people who make content just for other people to use. On YouTube, they make sound effects and green screen videos just for you. So you're welcome to use those. There is also non-copyrighted music available on YouTube for you to use. Second thing to be aware of is that there is something called fair use policy, which means you can use other people's copyrighted content in your film. Not always. Some of their content can never be used, but in general, you can use a part of somebody else's project. Something to mention about using any type of content generated by other people is that you will want to have a way to download YouTube videos or screen record them. I highly recommend 4K Downloader. I've used that for many years, and I highly recommend TechSmith's Snagit screen recorder software. Okay, now I'm going to give you some basic information about video editing software. Video editing is the key to creating a film. It's where all the magic happens. There are many kinds of video editing software. Some of them are simple, some of them are complicated, some of them are free, some of them you have to pay for. The two I use are Adobe Premiere Pro, which is widely considered the top choice for professionals, and Adobe Premiere Elements, which is often considered the best video editing software for beginners. The basic idea with video editing, common to all the software, is that you are bringing in all your different video clips, you are arranging them on a timeline, and then you do various edits to them and make adjustments. Then you add any music, sound effects, narration, or dialogue that you want. And once you get everything the way you want it, then you export the video and it creates a video compilation of everything that you've assembled on your timeline. These are some basic types of video edits that you can do in video editing programs. And these are some basic types of audio editing that you can do. I can't give you a complete tutorial on video editing in this film. It would take way too long. So I'll just focus on showing you some fun techniques and mention that on YouTube you can find instructions and tutorials on doing almost anything with various video editing programs. First, I'm going to show you Adobe Premiere Elements, this one, which is a simpler form of video editing software. In this one, you just open on Add Media, and you can click on the files you want, and then you can drop them in what's called your timeline, which is this area on the lower part of the screen. All video editing software will have a timeline, and that's the area where you compose your video. You put the clips in the order that you want in order to make your video. You just drop whatever clips you want in your timeline, and you can add effects to them, like I'm adding a keying effect, which removes the background green screen from this particular clip. And then I can put that in my picture, and this is what the magic of green screen does. It allows you to put something right in your own video or photograph so that it looks like it's part of your scene. Now, as you can see, the layout in this Adobe Premiere Elements is pretty simple. Doesn't look too complicated. There's a menu on the top, there's a menu over on the right side. You can just pick and choose what you want, and yet, even though it's a simpler program, it can do a lot, and it can do some things that Adobe Premiere Pro cannot do. So I'll give an example of a video transition, which I'm showing you here, which allows you to use a ice color transition from one video clip to another. Something else I really like about this software is it allows you to use a cartooner to turn your photograph or your video into a cartoon, and it allows you to do that in many styles. And I'll give you an example of how that's done here. You just take the new blue cartooner and drag that effect over onto the clip that you want to convert to a cartoon, and that does it. And then there's various styles that you can choose. So here I click on some different styles, and you can see that some of them are quite dramatic, and then I'll select a different one, and there's a whole range of them. So you can do a lot of creative things with Adobe Premiere Elements, and this is not available on the more sophisticated and expensive Adobe Premiere Pro. Now there's another great use for this type of effect, which is to get around copyright issues. As I mentioned earlier, there's some cases where other people's work is entirely copyright protected, and if you try to use it in your video will be totally blocked, and you will not be able to play it on YouTube. So in those cases, if you change the video enough, such as by using a cartoon effect, it will not be blocked. So here's an example of using a Saturday Night Live clip, and Saturday Night Live is one of those that you cannot use at all without getting your video blocked, unless you do changes to it in the way that I'm showing you here. You can also get around the video copyright by reducing the size of the clip, such as by putting it on a TV screen in your video like this. Now keep in mind that if you're getting your video blocked on YouTube due to copyright issues, you can't just change the video, you also have to change the audio. And pitch shifter is not adequate to get around the audio copyright, so you're going to have to do a voiceover. Okay, back to discussing Adobe Premiere Elements. Adobe Premiere Elements also has music tracks built into it, so you can take and put one of those in the timeline and it generates the music track. There's also all kinds of film effects you can use, like I'm using old vintage film. You can bend the film or photograph. There's also various transitions you can use, so like this wave transition. I do find it strange that Adobe Premiere Elements, even though it's a much less sophisticated program, has way more options for transitions than Premiere Pro. As you see here, Premiere Pro has only basically 7 types of transitions. Now, it's not just transitions that you can use transitions for. Here's an example of an effect that you could use to create a feeling of an earthquake. It's called the shake, and you have that in Premiere Elements, but not in Premiere Pro. So this is Adobe Premiere Pro, and you go in a similar way. You just open files, and then you put them into your project. The main difference with this from the simpler software is that the layout is not as intuitive. However, it has enormous power to do things that you cannot do with Adobe Premiere Elements and simpler forms of video editing. Okay, now let's take a look at some fun things you can do. I am overlaying a photograph on top of a photograph, and I am putting this photograph onto a computer screen in the existing photograph. So I've made the size of the second photo smaller, and now I'm moving it into position so it's on the computer screen. And you can see that in the lower left corner, part of it is covering another object in the photo, so I need to stop that from happening. And the way I do that is I use something called opacity. And opacity is essentially a way that you can crop an object in any shape, because it allows you to make a mask, and only the amount of the picture that is inside the mask is going to show, and everything else is not going to show. Opacity also allows you to make things more or less transparent in your video. So you just do like I'm doing here, and you just move the little points on the mask so that it fits right over the spot that you want, and be careful not to accidentally rotate it. And then you have a computer screen in your dollhouse or your film set that has a certain image on it that you have put on it. Now I'm going to add a second image to this as well. So I take a picture of my character on a green screen background, which I have made on Adobe Photoshop Elements. Then I select the Ultra Key tool, which removes the green from that picture. And then I can move my guy into the image on the computer, and then I can shrink him down to the correct size. And voila! I have, it looks like this photograph of the dollhouse room is showing a computer screen which has a picture of one of my characters in a room somewhere else. There are a lot of adjustments you can make to your video. You can change the color, you can open Lumetri color, and then you can set the color. You can make it more green, you can make it more reddish, you can change the saturation, the contrast, all kinds of adjustments. You want to make sure to save your project often in case there's a crash so you don't lose your work. This is something you'll find as you get involved in video editing, is that there are a lot of software crashes. Now I'm going to show you how to add text. You can add text like this, and you can change the color of the text and the size of the text. You can also blur a part of your video or photo. So suppose that there is something in the background that you don't want there. Go over to the effects panel and you click on effects, and then you click on video effects, and then you go to where it says blur and sharpen, and you click on Gaussian blur, and you drag that over to your clip, and then you can select a mask of the appropriate size. It either is an ellipse or a rectangle closer to the size of what you want to blur, and then you just adjust the size of the mask so that it covers what you want to blur, and then you adjust the amount of blur, and voila, your object is now concealed. Okay, now I want to do a fun demonstration of how you can make an entire video scene using just a toy, nothing else, no film set at all. You're going to be using green screen and photos and videos that you find online. I've selected this toy, and the first thing I'm going to do is take a picture of this toy against a solid color background. You can use any solid color. You just want a color that is not within the toy. Like if you have a red toy, you don't want a reddish or pinkish background. So I used a green background for this. So I'm going to overlay 3 images. So I'm going to stack 3 different images on the timeline. One is a green screen video of ocean waves, another is a video of clouds in the sky, and then the third is my picture of my toy with the green background. Now, as soon as I use Ultra key on the video of the waves with the green screen background, the green disappears, and immediately I get a very nice picture video of waves crashing in the ocean with a cloudy sky, active cloudy sky overhead. Now I go to my toy picture and I make it the correct size, and then I remove the green screen color from my toy background. Now I also have to crop the picture because I have extra areas above and below which were not in the green screen. And once I've accomplished all that, I have my toy figure against this ocean background. Now what I want to do is I want to make it look like the figure is in the ocean and is drowning. My picture on the lower right, because the object that I used as the background had glare on it, so I'm going to use the opacity mask so that I can basically crop that lower corner out. Next, I move my figure over to the correct position by clicking on position over in effect controls, and that allows me to just drag it over, and then I am going to rotate it slightly so it's at an angle, and I could also do that by clicking on rotation and then just turning it. I'm going to resize it, and then I'm going to rotate it slightly by just hooking on one of the corners and rotating it there. I want to show you how you get the effect of the figure drowning, and that is done by changing the position over time. So you can click on position, and you click on the little clock-like item in front of the word position. It allows you to set changes in position over the duration of the clip. So I set the starting position at a certain point, and then I move and figure out where I want the final position to be when the figure is like way deep in the water. And then I also need to crop the figure as he's sinking in the water so that it looks like his lower part is gone. So on the crop controls, I also click on the little clock so I can change the crop amount over time. And I keep working back and forth and adjust these until I get the result that I want of it looking like the figure is sinking gradually into the water. Now suppose I want to make it more interesting and add a shark in the water. And so I find a green screen shark. I've downloaded a video of a green screen shark, or maybe 2 of them, and I put those in the project, and then I move them onto the timeline. And then I use Ultra Key on those clips to remove the green from those. And then I start working on getting the shark in the right position. Now, since the shark is underwater, I want to change the opacity of the clip with the shark so it looks more transparent, which will give the feeling that it's underwater. So I change the opacity on that and I make it look like an underwater shark, and then I just keep working on the position. Now let's say I want to use another green screen shark to put in there and have it look like the shark is much bigger at the end of the clip because it's right underneath my drowning figure. So I put that one in. On this one I need to crop because it actually has two sharks. So I crop from the bottom to take the lower shark out. And then of course you want to add music. So the last thing I want to talk about is narration and dialogue. You can get a good range of voices using pitch shifter in the audio editing.
What's taking so long? Dad, I think there's something wrong with my voice.
Sounds fine to me.
So for instance, here's my voice in my normal sound. Here is me making it higher, and here is me making it still higher and higher. Here is me making my voice lower.
And still lower, and even lower.
Now another thing is some people might think they can use an AI voice creator for their films. This actually does not work very well for the most part because the AI voices will not know where to emphasize which words, and so you're not able to convey the emotional impact that you would like with AI voices. So an example of that, I'm going to have the same thing being said 3 times. The first time is me with pitch shifter, and then after that, 2 different AI voices. Well, let's see what this is. Actually, I think I know what it is. So secretive and mysterious. Let's head out on this mysterious adventure.
Well, let's see what this is. Actually, I think I know what it is. So secretive and mysterious. Well, let's head out on this mysterious adventure.
Well, let's see what this is. Actually, I think I know what it is. So secretive and mysterious. Well, let's head out on this mysterious adventure.
So the AI voices certainly sound real, but the emotional emphasis that I created in the first clip cannot be put into the AI voices when they read the text that I type in. So that's the drawback, and you need to decide whether an AI voice would work for you. My recommendation is use them for minor characters, but not for major characters, because you may come to a point in your story where you really need a certain emotional emphasis and you just can't get it out of the AI voice. Okay, last thing I want to discuss, which is related to narration in dialogue in Toy Story films, is that you can actually use a green screen moving mouth to put onto your characters to make it look like they are talking. So you just put your photo or video in, you drag the green screen mouth over, you take out the green with Ultra Key, move the mouth into the correct position, and voila, talking characters. So the last thing I want to say is, in whatever form of creativity you are involved in, be yourself. Do you. Don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about how many views you get. Do what your soul is calling you to do, and that is what will bring you happiness.